Hey guys, welcome to the Global Poker League and a new strategy segment here we're doing at the GPL. This week I'm very fortunate to be joined by the Las Vegas moneymaker, Mr. Jonathan Little. He's going to be taking us through a hand from the Eurasian Six Match 1 on the GPL. He's going to take us through a hand involving Igor Yarashevsky and Dominic Nietzsche. What was it about this hand that particularly interested you, Jonathan?
Well, so this is from match number 117. You can see all the information at the top. Check out the Global Poker League app and rewatch that if you have not already. Anyway, in this hand, Leno folds under the gun with his 11,000 chip stack, which may not seem that relevant, but his stack is actually going to dictate a lot of the action for the rest of the hand. Notice that he only has 13 big blinds or so he is very likely to go broke before Igor, who has 23,000, Liv, who has 17,000, and Dario, who has 26,000. We're just estimating. You can work with estimates in poker. So in this situation, after Leno folds, Igor picks up ace-7 offsuit, and he decides to raise. So we'll follow the action around. So it is on Igor, and he's going to make a pretty standard min raise to 1,600. And in regular six-handed poker, if you were not concerned with the stack sizes, you would think this is just a very standard raise because you're in the cutoff, you have a reasonable hand, etc. But whenever the stack sizes are set up like this, where Dominic actually has 72,000 chips, we started with 25,000, so everyone at the table is chipped down, effectively, besides him. And this allows Dominic to apply a lot of pressure to the other medium stacks, Igor, Liv, and Dario, because they really want to try to outlast Leno. So in this scenario, Dominic should be raising with a really wide range, and that's exactly what he does. So Igor raises to 1,600. Dominic makes it 3 times that because he really doesn't want to let Igor call with stuff like Queen Jack suited and see a flop. He wants to put Igor in an all-in or fold situation and make him risk his whole stack. You really, as the big stack, you want to make the small and medium stacks have to risk their whole stack and risk going broke in order to play a pot. So Dominic does re-raise to 4,800. Liv and Dario now need to be very tight because if they go all in, they're going to get called a reasonable amount of the time and they're going to be out. They wouldn't get called this time, of course, but on average. And now it gets back to Igor. And Igor's in a pretty nasty spot because he correctly realizes that if he opens wide before the flop, Dominic should be re-raising him pretty often. And that will not be good for him. He has to either fold the 1,600, which you never want to do, especially when you expect to get re-raised a lot, right? It's a little different folding this 1,600 if you raise and you expect Dominic to be really tight. But it's the opposite of that. We expect Dominic to be loose. And Igor realizes that. So Igor picks the other option. After a bit of thought, he decides to go all in, which is actually a really sweet play. The problem with going all in, though, is that, remember back to Leno at the beginning of this hand, he doesn't want to go broke before Leno. And if Dominic just happens to have a good hand very often at all, and really he doesn't even need to have a good hand that often at all because he put in this 4,800 to force Igor to put in 23,000. If Dominic ever has a hand, he's going to call. Igor's going to be out in 5th place, and that would be really bad for the Moscow Wolverines. And given Moscow is actually currently at the top of the standings, or near the top of the standings, one of the two, they really just want to get a few points each game. They're not trying to necessarily win anymore. So because of that, I'm not really sure I like even the initial raise by Igor because he opens himself up to going broke and getting only 1 point for his team. Whereas if he plays a little bit tighter, he can lock up 2 or 3 or maybe even 5 points with relatively little risk. But he does go all in, Dominic folds, and Igor chips up nicely.
In terms of Liv and Dario, although they appear to have a similar stack size to Igor, their sort of leverage at the table is a lot kind of different in comparison to Igor, just due to their position on Dominic.
Yeah, so notice Dominic has the, 72,000 he had a second ago, now still 67,000, which is a lot. If he raises at this blind level, remember the blinds are 400, 800, all this information is at the top. He's going to raise to about 2,000, and now Liv can easily go all in with a pretty wide range, because if she expects Dominic to be raising a lot, she can go all in. So typically, if you can go all in for about 10 times your opponent's raise size or less, so in this spot, if he makes it, say, 1,800 or 2,000, if you have 18,000 or 17,000, or if you have less than 20,000 or 18,000, it's a bit of a tongue twister, you can go all in with a pretty wide range because your opponent just cannot call very often because they have to risk a lot of their chips. And even though Dominic does have a nice stack, he's not just trying to lose 20,000 chips for fun. So this is a spot where if Dominic raises to 2,000, Liv can go all in pretty wide and force everyone to fold. But of course, again, she still has to be aware of Leno. Like if she doesn't expect Dominic to be opening wide, she has to be very tight. And this is where it's really important to have at least some idea of how your opponents play. And the problem is Dominic plays great. And whenever your opponents play great, it's really hard to take too much of advantage of them. Dario, it may look like he has a similar situation as Liv, but Dario is actually in a much worse spot because of his deeper stack. Now notice if Dominic raises to say 2,000, for Dario to go all in, it'll be 12.5 times that amount. So instead of Liv's 9 or 8 times that amount, here Dario would be going all in for 12.5 times that amount. So going all in is a little bit risky. So now he's forced into re-raising to something like 4,000. And if he re-raises to 4,000 or 4,800, now Dominic has the play to go back all in and force Dario to fold. Because again, Dario's not going to want to call off with the short stack, Leno just hanging out at the top of the table, patiently waiting, trying to get 4th or 3rd place.
Well, a masterclass in table dynamic and chip distribution and ICM there from Jonathan Little. We thank him for that. Join us next time on Strategy Corner, maybe with Jonathan, maybe one of our other guest pros here at the GPL. And in the meantime, adios.
Connect with us on social media for league updates and download our app GPL TV to stay on top of everything GPL.